Welcome to the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Thank you for joining our weekly discussion around grief, mental health, and your overall personal wellness. The Grief Bully Podcast will serve as a vehicle to help you navigate life's journey. Be sure to subscribe, review, and share the podcast with anyone in your life that you think it will help. Let's bully grief together. What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to another episode of the Grief Bully Podcast. I am your host, J.Nicole. Today is Monday, July the 12th. We are back in the studio rocking and rolling. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 100. Let's go. I am so excited, feeling blessed, feeling grateful and thankful. You guys have been rocking with me for 100 episodes in a row, and I wanted to bring to you today a very impactful, very powerful story that I know that it's going to open up a lot of people's eyes and it's going to help them. And most importantly, it's going to give my guest another home for her story. I'm going to welcome to the show right now, Aziza Kibibi. Did I do it well?
Yes, you did.
Oh,
very good. Very
yes.
good, J.Nicole.
Guys, I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. I'm like, I don't want to mess up her name. I think names are very important. And I wanted to make sure that I did that the right way. I'm not even going to hold the fluff. What I want to do is get into this. So imagine that you go through something, and I've seen this before, that you felt that you were absolutely living a nightmare. Perhaps you might have felt you were a nightmare. And then you get to this other side of it. And so when I think about your story, and I'm going to let you kind of talk about it, I think about this. There's always going to be the how and the what to things. So we'll talk about the what. But what I think is beautiful is the how, because you went through something that is, I'm going to say from my own personal experience and opinion, the absolute epitome of unimaginable. But yet, you're here with me on episode 100, smiling, beautiful smile for all the cameras and all the audience. That's what I mean. Like, how do people do that? So I certainly want to get into that. But like I said, I welcome you to the show. And we're gonna just get into your story as being a survivor.
Okay, so yeah, I guess that just means you want me to just jump in like head first.
We can let's do it. Let's do it because you know what? I've seen footage of you speaking, and I know that you are straight to the point, matter of fact. And I'm going to definitely make sure that my audience knows is a very sensitive subject. So potential trigger warnings. I want to make sure that you're aware of that. Check the show notes, all that good stuff will be there.
Right.
But yeah, I want to get into your story.
Okay, so I think you saw my YouTube videos,
Yes.
right? And what I do on my YouTube videos, I am Aziza Kibibi, is that I seek to raise awareness about child molestation, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And the reason why I do that is because of my own personal experience. When I was 8 years old, my father started molesting me. And then at the age of 10, he started raping me. And ironically enough, he was polygamous, and he was also raping me with another woman. By the time I was 12, he deemed me his sex slave and said that my only purpose in the world was to satisfy him sexually. And then when I got pregnant at 15 and my daughter was born without any kind of health defects, which his girlfriend, who was also molesting me with him, expected to happen, he decided that it was God's will for him to create a new blue blood race. So he started breeding me, literally, and I have 4 children by him. He also, go ahead if you need to breathe.
Yeah, no, you know what? There was so much there that I had to stop you because I don't want to breeze past and not be able to really unpack what we heard there. Because to you, you're saying it's your story. It's a part of your experience in your chapter. But for someone like myself, again, I've seen some things. Majority of what you just said, I was not aware of. And I did that purposely. I didn't want to. I want us to have authentic conversation. So what first comes to mind to me before we get to the sex slave part of it and the all of that aspect, before 8 years old, what was your father in your eyes? What was that relationship like? Because I'm just wondering as a young girl and you have your father in your life up until that age from birth until 8. What was that like, if you don't mind me talking about? Like, did you see any warning signs or was it just like blindsided?
Well, I think It's something you mentioned, the warning signs. And on the trip up here, I was having this conversation with the young lady who drove me. As children, we look at our parents as like they're just right, right? And we have to accept them. We have to love them, especially if, from your understanding, they are good parents. And that's how I saw my parents. My dad was my hero. My mom was like the most beautiful, charismatic, loving woman. And they, in my eyes, had a perfect relationship. And that is what I knew, even at 6, 7, 8 years old. You know, as girls, we're often taught, like, well, this is what you have children, you get married. I idealized their relationship.
They were married?
Yes, they were married. So then when he started molesting me, what he told me was that this is what all fathers did with their daughters in order to teach them how to be a woman. So that, in my young mind, kind of made sense. But at the same time, it was scary because my mom told me that no one is supposed to touch my privates except her. Now, in addition, I was homeschooled. So I hadn't been interacting with children in the school system. I was not around teachers or doctors. My father also did not believe in Western medicine. So any ailments that me and my siblings had growing up, he treated. So what he said was the end all be all for everything. So to answer your question, before the abuse started, everything in my life I felt was perfect. And then the limited interaction that we did have with some of our cousins, they just thought it was so cool that we didn't go to school. And we were also considered very intelligent for our age. And I say our because my mom had 9 children. So I'm the oldest of 9 by my mother.
They're all with your father? Your mom's 9? Okay.
Yes, all with my father. But my father, including my own children, had 21 that we've counted so far.
21.
Yeah.
So that is a great point that you've counted so far. Wow, 21.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that, interrupting you in that part. So you can.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So as far as our life, and then he was respected in the community. You know, a lot of people respected him. He had a charisma. He was very into African and African American culture. He changed his name from Eric McGill, right, which he considered his slave name, and changed it to Aswada Yinde, and named all of his children African names. So he was very aware, and we grew up learning about African American history and the positions of Black people in America and how we got here, so on and so forth. You know, our family was cool. Everybody loved us. We had trips. My dad had a band. Like, it was really very storybook.
He was well known. He was a producer, I think you said, of the Fugees' Killing Me Softly.
He directed, way down the line, he directed Killing Me Softly for the Fugees, among other things for them. But because he won an MTV Music Award for Killing Me Softly, that's his most known work.
Gotcha. But at that point, when he was experiencing those accolades and all of that stuff like that, the abuse had already started.
The abuse was all, I think I was 15, 16. I already had my first child by the time he won the MTV Music Award.
And what was the age when you had your first child?
I was 15.
15.
No,
wow.
I'm sorry. I got pregnant in 15, had her at 16.
16.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And you had other siblings, you said, as well.
Yes. So my mom had 9, but my father did not start. He ended up molesting 5 of his own daughters. I was the oldest, but he molested me for years before he then started molesting any of my sisters. And that was under the premise that I was doing things to prevent him. So he would have me so I wouldn't tell or I wouldn't fight. He would say that, well, you know, if you don't fight, if you don't tell, if you do this, you know, crazy sexual sadistic thing without complaint, then I won't go and do the same thing to your sister. So then I took on this role of protecting my siblings. But it all was, for lack of a better term, a waste, because then when I was about, I think I was 14 or 15, just before I got pregnant, I walked in on him molesting my sister, who was the next oldest sister. Okay. Yeah.
And what's that like? I mean, so 2 things there. One, he said that if you will cooperate, that's the word I'm going to use with this, if you will cooperate and go along with it, and not tell. So who was he afraid you would tell? Because was your mother living under this roof as well? So did she have any idea, or was he afraid you would tell her, or would it be your other siblings or family members? Because you were homeschooled, but I don't know how much interaction you had with family or other people that you could tell.
Right. So it was gradual. Initially, when my father started molesting me, we were allowed to interact with our extended family members, with his parents, with my mom's parents, my cousins. But then as the abuse got worse, he started separating us even more. He also trained all of the siblings to tell on each other if they ever saw, me talking to another adult or an adult asking us questions. So he had real control in that respect. My mom found out that he was molesting me. So to answer your question, yes, initially my mom didn't know.
Okay.
So when he told me that, and there was the grooming aspect where he told me that I was special. I was the oldest because I excelled in my homework, so on and so forth, was the reason why he was giving me special attention. Then when I started questioning it and then I didn't like it, or expressing that I didn't like it, then he would say, well, I can't tell mommy because she would go crazy or she'd get really upset, which then, of course, in my mind was conflicting. So I'm like, well, if you said that this is okay and everybody's doing this, then why can't I tell her? And then things just got more violent after that. Anyway, he ended up telling her when I was 10. Yes. He told
her. So was this like in a heated argument, tell her, or did he sit down with her and say, hey, I want to have this conversation and I want to tell you about this?
That's a good question, and I probably should ask her about that. But what she told me at the time was that, he told her that he was molesting me. She didn't use the word molesting, that he was like doing what he was doing with me to help my skin condition because I had asthma. I grew up pretty kind of sickly because my asthma wasn't treated. In fact, my parents didn't know that it was asthma. And I had really bad allergies. I had eczema all over my body. And he told her that him molesting me and him having sexual activities with me was helping my health. And for some crazy reason, she accepted that and she didn't question him. Then when he started raping me and she found out that he was having intercourse with me, I do remember her questioning him about it, and then he beat her with a belt. But before then, their relationship already started becoming abusive.
Okay, so I was going to ask.
Right, because he had started adopting the polygamous lifestyle, but it did not happen like it happened with him. It started with him cheating, and she found out, and their relationship changed throughout that time, and then he started becoming abusive in that way. But then when he did, this was actually the first time I actually witnessed him him actually beating her, and he beat her with a belt. And after that, she just never really questioned anything more.
Wow. And I don't want to fast forward, but I would be remiss if I missed this opportunity. Do you have a relationship with your mother now?
Not really, but okay. So initially, when we escaped my father, we became very close. And that was a lot of work on my part. I decided that I would forgive her for her not protecting us. I understood her position. Then I was also educating myself. So I learned what domestic violence was. I'd learned the psychological effect that it has on women. And I forgave her. But then there was this weird kind of animosity, not towards me, but also towards my children. And it used to come out in our interactions. And then it just got to a point over time that it was affecting my children too much. They were feeling, too isolated, too treated. They were being treated differently. They were being blamed for certain things around the house. And I mean, that's the only thing I could connect it to, because she did not treat any of her other grandchildren, that way. So I love her from a distance now. So at one point we were very close. But now things are a little different.
No, so. That makes perfect sense. I mean, I think one of the things too for the listeners that is important to catch there is that sometimes education can bring you closer to healing, or at least to be closer to forgiveness, because you understand someone's position. So I always say that too, that my back wasn't against that person's wall, and so I wasn't in that position. Because I think it could be easy to just throw shade at your mom and for people to be like, what a terrible mother, she let this happen to her children, how could she do this, and not knowing what her circumstance was,
Right.
and what that was like. So I think it's admirable for you to even have gotten to that place to try to find some sort of reconciliation, even if it was just temporary and things had to change with that. I mean, it's tough. So I'm glad that you were able to definitely do that. So when it comes to your children, I think, and this is what I found, because I DM'd you immediately. I came across your story. Somehow I watched just different things on YouTube, and it just came up, and I'm like, what was this? I wish I could remember what the title, because a lot of your titles to your videos are definitely like, whoa, I need to click on this because this just seems like something that I would be interested in learning more about. And so I immediately DM'd you because I'm thinking like, wow, how is this person still lively and smiling and all of these things? But I hear stories about sexual abuse and domestic violence and such, but I don't often hear stories where the child or the person that was being abused then had children for, and I'm using for because I picked up on that from how you write things and not by, that you had children.
I've gotten a lot of heat for that for and by thing.
Really? Let's talk about it, because I instantly picked up on it. I'm like, well, I noticed that she doesn't say I had children by my father or my father's children, like it said specifically children for my father. Let's talk about that.
So there is some conflict because, and I feel like this is a space where people that have children, I'm going to say women who have children for their rapist or have been impregnated by a rapist or through incestuous abuse, they connect that abuse with their child. And oftentimes they give the child away up for adoption or have an abortion, so on and so forth. Where for me, I love my children as their own entities, as their own individual. And I feel like that there are moments when I'm telling my story, this for and by thing, when you say by, I feel like it brings my children, yes, they are a result of the abuse, but they are also the result of God, of life, of me. Well, then it sounds like, oh, well, you willingly had your child for. But at the same time, they're their own entity in my life. And they're also a manifestation of my own self and my love for them. So I do kind of interchange depending what space I'm explaining. But I use for more often just because this was the circumstances. Yes, this was the circumstances. But at the same time, my children are their own souls and they're their own spirit. So I don't know how much that makes sense.
No, it actually made a lot of sense. And I'm glad we dived into it, because I think it's important that what I like to talk about on the Grief Bully podcast is that we're all so individual. And so however we move through our grief, our pain, our trauma, our experiences, it's unique to us.
Right.
So I'm just going to say it, and this is no offense to anybody that's been abused or anything, but however you want to say it, it's your story. So whatever terminology you want to use, you have to use that because it was only your experience. No one else went through it. And how you see your children and how other people see their children after it, it's going to just differ depending on circumstances. So when we speak about that too, I mean, there are some things where, again, and forgive me if I say anything offensive, I'm just trying to understand the picture. So some people could view it that your children are your siblings. Do you view it that way, or how do you feel about that?
Under certain circumstances, that's something that has to be acknowledged, and that's something that we do acknowledge in our relationship. Because I told my oldest daughter when she was 13, she always wondered who her father was. Well, I don't want to give. A lot of it is in my book. A lot of it is in
which
book.
We will talk about, ladies and gentlemen.
But so initially, my children, in the process of escaping my father, which was a like maybe a 3, 4, 5 year period of actually escaping him, I lost my children to the system. So they were taken by DIFUS. They were sent to foster care. And that experience for my oldest daughter was traumatic. And she lost a lot of her memory of her life with me. But she kept it at the same time. But she did regress. Like, I had taught her how to read and she forgot how to read. So things like that happened while she was in foster care. But she did remember her father. And my father was raising my children as if I was not their sibling. So they didn't know that he was my father as well. So when they then come back to me, they had been taught by their grandmother, who was their foster parent for about a year and a half, that the man who they used to call daddy is actually their grandfather. So when they came back to me, they didn't know who their father was. And I told her that I would tell her when she was ready. Well, 13 ended up being the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, we just then had to have a conversation. She was like, so mommy, does that mean you're my sister? And I'm like, yeah, it does. And I think that when we deal with incestuous abuse or children born from incestuous abuse, that part is something that people don't really consider, because literally there is no I hit the mic. There's no, I guess, familial expansion where two people get married from two different families. Then your network, your familial network grows. But when you have children born out of incest, they don't. It stays the same. So they have only family on my father's side, and there's the same family that's my family. And it affects them socially. It affects as far as their social development. I lost my frame of thought.
No, I never considered that part of it. I've never considered that part of it, that they only have that one singular family in terms of that. And so I think what we're talking about is, for some people it could be a little uncomfortable, but this is what I'm all about, is that we have to have these uncomfortable conversations because it's a reality. And so you might be the only story that I'm aware of, but it could be a lot of other people, which I'm sure you might be aware of just over the years and experience, that might have a similar story or something along those lines. And so it's super important, because grief by definition is just deep sorrow, ladies and gentlemen. And I don't say just meaning that to minimize it, but it's deep sorrow. And so although you may not feel sorrowful now, you're not presenting as such, I would have to argue, and I probably would argue this against you as well, that life of 8 until the age where you escaped and beyond has had some deep sorrow, some deepest moments. Do you have like a moment that you're like, this is literally like the pit of hell? Like, this is like, how, I don't even know. Was it when you lost your children? Was it when this first started? Do you have any moment like that where you're like, this is the low, I am broken?
There was a couple of moments. I remember one time my father, okay, so I'm going to warn the audience, it does get a little heavy here. So initially when my father was hired to direct Killing Me Softly, he was also fired. So he was hired, he had the project, and then he was fired. What he had the habit of doing, and I think this is what narcissistic abusers do have, they blame others for their problems and they take it out on other people. So
Absolutely.
I was pregnant at the time, and he sodomized me and he beat me, and I lost the baby. So not to say that, and this is another thing, sometimes there is conflict because you're in a situation where you are pregnant for your abuser. But at the same time, you know, that's a life for me. It was like a life that I was taking care of, that I was responsible for within me. And I love children. I have a lot of siblings, so I grew up around children. Yeah. So that was one time, because I lost a baby and then he blamed me. I was kind of shunned. He had this habit of pitting people in the family against each other. So that was a low. When I lost my children to authorities, yes, that was a huge low, because, you know, I loved my children. No matter where they came from, I loved them dearly. And to have them taken away from me was very, very hard. Okay, I have to take a breath.
Yeah, take your time. That's deep. And that's why for me, I had to think. I said, I want to hear your story. I want to hear Aziza's story. Will this be something that aligns with the grief bully? Because that's really important to me, is to make sure that. But the moment that we just shared and what we just experienced right there, that's grief. Like, you lost a life. And so no matter how people view it, and that's what I'm finding and learning in this conversation with you, is it's so admirable that you're not necessarily letting the the circumstances, if you will, of kind of where people say the happening isn't on you, but the healing is, or some things happen to you that might not have been anything you could have controlled. But the things that you could control was to nurture this life, whether you wanted this to happen or not. And I'm going to tell you, that is beautiful. And because I'm going to be completely honest, I don't know if I would be able to do it. And that's what I love to hear, stories of such grit and resilience, because I look at the small things that I get upset about in life, and I'm just like, you're really an idiot. Like, it's really not that big. You got people that are really carrying some heavy stuff, and that was definitely a moment there. And I just extend my love to you. I know it was some years ago, but I know grief well enough to know that still stays present with us no matter what happens. And so the way that you see your children now, I think that's an amazing thing. Were there because I just want to understand this, did you sit down and have dinner together? Was there any, while this was going on, was there any sort of family, and I'm going to air quote this, ladies and gentlemen, normalcy to it? Did we just go as business as usual, or is it
we're talking about while I was, my dad was in control of my life.
Yep, when your dad was in control of your life.
Yes. My dad was very traditional. He had very traditional values. He believed that the man is the head of the family, and the women, at that time, women are supposed to do what the man says. He was also the breadwinner, even though it did get times where he incorporated everybody. So he had a production company that, produced the music videos, but he only hired a few people. We were the production company. So my brother did the editing and the special effects. At 14 years old, he was considered a prodigy. My mom was the producer. I was the office manager. Everybody was PAs. That's how it was. But in general, at home, he had a very old-fashioned, structured, traditional values when it came to what our home life was. All the women cleaned house, all the women cooked. I was the assigned cook. I had to cook all of his meals. And then sometimes we did do family things. Now, I think and this is a thing that I actually don't get to talk about often, so thank you.
Let's go. That's what we're here for.
There is horrible, and as evil as my father was, and as horrible as my upbringing and my life, in his control was, there were still moments where we felt like, we was a family. So there were times that we looked forward to, whether it be everybody loading up and going to the movies. He allowed us to watch science fiction, or sitting in the living room watching Star Trek. But where the damage about those moments was because you did not know when he was going to flip.
Gotcha.
And you lived in a state of fear of not wanting to piss him off. Because as soon as you did, somebody was getting a black eye, someone was being called into the room. So that's where it was. But you could still appreciate some moments, and there's nothing that's all good and there's nothing that's all bad. And I do have some, what you want to say, fond memories, especially with my siblings growing up or in my life. But that cloud of just fear of pissing him off or doing something wrong, or him just having a bad day.
I thank you for sharing that, because although some of his behavior I can argue was as of a monster, but it's that part because it's still your father. And so I think that I would hope that there will be more opportunities for you to discuss that side, because again, regardless of the action, I can't even say it on even this part of a level, but my father was pretty wild at times, and there was some things, and I remember a therapist, this is actually a professional therapist, was giving me pushback because I was able to just still care about my father and be there, even though he's like, oh, you're gonna whatever for this alcoholic and all this, and I'm just like, wow, you're a therapist, I don't understand how you don't understand that these people are still your family to you, that at that point, until you escaped and maybe your perspective changed or it didn't, but that's kind of a part of it. And so there's somewhere where it was stated he didn't allow us to pray to God. We had to pray to him.
Right.
So is that some like what does that even feel like when I'm saying that to you? Does that bring you back to how it was, or
At this point, it sounds ridiculous.
I mean, it does, but you know, you got to say that. I can't say that.
Like at this point, it sounds really ridiculous. But going back to that place, and I think a lot of abuse survivors can attest, there is a space where you're questioning what is right and what is wrong, right? Where you're questioning what reality is. I mean, I went through a point of what I know now was deep depression when I was in my teenage years, where I was really wishing that my experience and his abuse and my life was the nightmare. And when I would go to sleep was my real life. Right. So there gets to be a question. I believe in some spaces they call it gaslighting, when you make a victim feel crazy. But there was a point where it's like, well, he's being blessed. He is getting opportunities. He's making money. Maybe what he's doing is correct. And maybe I'm the wrong one. And if I am in pain and I am suffering, maybe I should stop fighting. Right? Because if I did, then things would get better. And then you just start to question, like, okay, what is up? What is down? What is left? What is right? So there was that aspect. So now going back to, our family structure and like what you mentioned with, it's still your parent. At some point you did love them. And for a long time, I just wanted the abuse to stop. It's not like I wanted anything bad to happen to him. It's not like I wanted him to drop dead. I mean, that did come up too.
I was going to say, did we ever get to that? Because I might have been like...
That did come up too. I was the one responsible for cooking his food. And there were times that I considered poisoning his food. But there were times that one time he got sick. One time he got really sick, not because of anything I did. But he got really sick. And I was like, God, is this the time you're going to take him? Like, yes, please let this be the time. But it wasn't. It wasn't. So those moments do exist. But at the same time, it's like, well, he's being successful. Things are going. People love him. People loved my father. They invested in his business. Women loved him. They flocked. So there was a lot of conflict just throughout. Cause it's like, well, but he's a horrible, evil person from my perspective. So why do people love him?
Where does that, the conflict's there. So where does that conflict arise between you and God? Because that's a lot to question. You just said, hey, I'm the one here suffering and this person is thriving. And then also when you thought maybe God was going to take him and he did, and it's like, God, do you see this? Do you hear this? Like, what's that like then? And I guess I could ask you now, like, do you even have a faith based on, I mean, your voicemail says have a blessed day, but I'm just saying.
Well, I am a lover of God. I am a lover of the Creator, the one. And I just don't believe, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was like, well, what if I asked you, there's all this suffering in the world. What kind of God would allow that to happen? I'm sure you've heard or seen that conversation.
Absolutely.
I'm like, well, from what we know, what we understand through religion is that God gave humans the right to make a choice. And what would it look like if you give someone a choice and to create their own path for them to now come and intervene and change things around? Then you don't have the right to choose. So one thing that my experience and getting through my experience has done is study two things, psychology and spirituality, and how different cultures interact with the divine. Because yes, I think, while my father was a very I
can't help you.
In contrast to what his behaviors were, he was all about God and spirituality. So I was raised exposed to many different religions. And after escaping him, I continued to study like how religions drive people, what role they play in the demise of humanity and in the upliftment of humanity. And I basically just came to the conclusion that, yeah, we're here with a choice and agency over our own lives. And unfortunately, that does come with negative impacts of people's decisions. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, since you do have a choice or the power to make a decision yourself in your own life, like you mentioned at the beginning of the show, then yeah, no matter what happens to you, you can choose how to respond to it. And that's essentially, what I've done. I've decided to not allow what happened to me dictate how I live the rest of my life.
Yeah, and that's very evident. I can see that 100% here. And so I know one of the things that I would instantly think about, and this is honestly with anyone that's been sexually abused, is how are their relationships romantically, not necessarily sexually, but just romantically, because that's your personal business. But like as far as just relationships, dating or marriage or anything like that, how has that been, or where is that? What is that like after you've had this, I'm just going to say innocence, if you will. That's where a lot of us are most familiar with. Your innocence was robbed and taken from you to an extent, or maybe temporarily if you got it back. However, I don't want to put words in your mouth or in your experience. But then like what's your viewpoint of that, like being with someone in that way?
It took some time to work through. Once I escaped my dad, and he indoctrinated in me that my only purpose was to be some kind of sexual satisfaction to someone else, which he actually then condemned, right? This made you a lower person, and that's why women were beneath men, because they are here to serve women, blah, blah, blah. So when I did, it took a while for me to get over that programming. And it instilled in me a fear of men. And in some cases, because of my experience with his girlfriend, some cases women as well. Because this woman only had a sexual interest in me through my father, then I started even looking at female relationships, right? Even platonic female relationships is like, well, you just want to have sex with me and you're only... So it was kind of the same thing.
That makes sense.
And I just had to learn how to trust. I had to rationalize that my father was full of lies. And he was manipulative, and he was trying to control me, and just keep telling myself that, combined with meditation and positive affirmations and reading and education.
The whole cocktail, right. You've done some work, and I think that's what it is. So we're at episode 100, and I've had an array of guests and so many conversations, and I've been on for a lot of solo episodes as well. And the one thing that I only hope every time when I say love and light, peace, because that's what I sign off at when I'm done my episodes, is that someone found more hope, more courage, more strength. And I think you can preach that. You can read that in as many books as you want to do. But when you can actually see it and you can actually hear it, and so what people are hearing and seeing that you're saying right now, if I wasn't live listening to this right now and I heard it, I would feel hopeful. I would feel hopeful that, like you said, if I made a choice, that these circumstances and the things that I went through will not define me. It's not going to rob me of that. I'm going to still figure it out. Man, that's what I'm learning from you. So again, I've said thank you a little earlier, but I'm definitely saying thank you again for that, because it's really important. When you meet people, whether that's romantically or just platonically or wherever, how does your story come out? Or if you're dating someone, or if you're married, or however, is it, these are my children? Do you say who their father is? Like what? Because obviously you have a YouTube channel, you have a book, you've been in the public eye with your story. Do you hope that they never read any of this, or what's that like?
No, not at all. And that's why my book is titled Unashamed, because I'm not ashamed of what happened to me. That in my mind would be continuing to give my father power over my life. Love that. So whatever conclusions they draw that's their issue. That's their issue. So I don't internalize that. As far as if I tell people right away, now that is something that I had to progress to, because when I met my ex-husband, I concocted a whole fantastical story.
Yeah.
I concocted a whole fantastical story because I still had the programming that my father put in me. Even though I was working hard with changing it and deprogramming myself, it was remnants of it was still there. And then I would face situations, not being socialized. I would face circumstances that I didn't consider that then would trigger a response that I thought that maybe I had gotten over, but I actually didn't. But now, I did date a filmmaker, and because he was in the public eye, I straight up told him, I was like, look, my kids are for my dad. I was raped, blah, blah, blah. I'm starting a nonprofit organization. I just want you to take that into consideration with your branding. So I just straight up told him, right? And he appreciated that. Other than that, yeah, because I have been on, different public platforms, pretty much people know.
Yeah, and you have a distinctive name too, so it's like, well, is that her? No, that's her. So
yeah,
I think that makes sense. And that's fair. I mean, I think your story overall is definitely, that's why I definitely had to give the audience the backstory just so we can follow and see where you started, so we can see the beauty of the resilience. But I wanted to focus more on the how and the survival aspect of it, because you are a survivor. And that's something that I think is really important, because when we talk about grief and losing loved ones or losing our lives, losing our childhood, our identity, you actually lost a child. And then whether people understand it or not, you lost your father. So when we talk about those grief moments, it's also important for us to see that we can get through it. And so that's really important. Speaking of losing your father, have you had any communication with him? I understand he is in prison. And so did you go to like the trial parts of it, and did you ever visit him in prison? Or write him?
I was a witness in the trial.
Okay.
So I saw him then. I went to a sentencing to speak on the impact that what he did has had on my life and my children's life. But no, I have not interacted with him outside of that. So the last time I saw him was, I believe he was sentenced in 2013 to 50 years in prison. And that was the last time I saw him. Other than that, my only interest in going to see him would be for my work, because I do work with survivors of abuse. And I feel like as a society, we always look at the victims. We always try, we pick apart. Yes, of course, the victims need support.
Absolutely.
But we want to stop this from happening. That's my goal. I know it's a tall order, but we really want to stop this from happening.
Stop one or two at a time, it's a lot.
And how do we do that? We need to talk to the abusers. What is going on in your head? Why do you think that this is okay? What, whether they may not even understand the negative impacts that are just completely driven by their dicks getting hard or, whatever.
Yeah.
So I would like to, where I am in my life, being something that he always told me I would never amount to without him, or that wasn't even an option, but that my purpose was only to serve him. I would like to then pick his brain with the knowledge that I have and see if I could find any information. A lot of people ask me, was he abused as a child? I don't know.
Right.
He spoke about his mother was Southern. His grandparents are from Alabama. He was born and raised in Tuskegee. So that they had that strict, go get the switch, kind of that, what we call physical abuse now or child abuse now. But he never said that he was molested, but it could be because he did not think that it was molestation. Like, I don't know. And I would really like to pick his brain.
Do you think he would be receptive? Because from what I'll stand corrected, from what I saw, that he actually didn't plead guilty. Did he not?
Yeah, he was denying it.
That's what I was going to say. Which is, to me, it's no disrespect. Let's take the him being your dad out of it. What the, there's actually DNA that can prove this, but you're still going to say these are not this.
He went through, they're not his children, to I was not his daughter, to he went through the gamut. His only intent was to just try not to go to jail.
Right. So I'm going to just keep whatever I'm going to say today. I got to try the most far-fetched thing to get out of here.
Exactly. He wasn't even concerned about the fact that he kept changing what he was saying was going on, how it looked to anyone else. So he was just saying whatever. At this point, I don't know. Interestingly enough, someone commented on one of my videos and said that they were they was his cellmate at one point. They were out now, but they was his cellmate at one point, and that he has a following in jail, which I'm not surprised. He's very convincing. But if that's the case and he's trying to preach the same belief system, then he may not be forthcoming. But maybe a guardian will walk in with me, an invisible guardian will walk in with me and make something click in his mind. I'm not going to know unless I actually go and do it.
Yeah. Have you forgiven him?
Yes, I have forgiven him. And that was important, or it is important to my healing, because again, everything that he did to me was really about power. Yes, it was his sexual gratification, but this man was drunk on power. He wanted to have power over his wife, eventually his wives and his girlfriends and his children, and the people that worked for him and the people that contributed. Like he was a power monger. And I really feel that that's mostly what it was about. But at the same time, I lost my frame of thought again.
I was just asking, did you forgive him? And then
okay. So thank you.
Okay.
So because he was such a power monger, he took some of my power. And I think that's really what rape and molestation does. It exploits a person. And part of the trauma is you feel like your power was taken away. We have agency over our bodies. No one's supposed to touch you unless you give them permission to. So if someone does that, then you feel like, well, then I have no power if someone can just violate me in that way. So my power, the power that I have, is to make the decision to say that I'm no longer holding you responsible. I'm not holding you responsible for my ability to then overcome the trauma that you inflicted on me. And that's for me what forgiveness is. Now, does it always stick? No.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
There are times that I get mad, and I know definitely when I lost my daughter, oh my gosh, I was so angry at him, because there was a point that, so my last daughter for him, he raped me, he beat me, and I was pregnant. And then he beat me while I was pregnant with her. So when she was born and she was losing her, he delivered her. He delivered all my children.
Really? I didn't know that part. Wow.
Yeah, he delivered all. So a lot of people ask me, well, why didn't you tell the nurse? Why didn't you tell the doctor? I'm like, my dad delivered all my children and most of my siblings. So when she was born, and then she got to the age where we've had so many babies, we know babies should be sitting up, we know a baby should be crawling, and she wasn't. He started blaming me. He started saying it was my negative energy, my milk was poisoned, like everything. He held me responsible for everything. So then when I escaped him and now taken her to the doctor, and it turns out she has this genetic inborn error called spinal muscular atrophy, which is a recessive disorder. He's a carrier, and me, because I'm his daughter, I'm a carrier. That's why. And it has nothing to do with the evil spirit surrounding me or my poisonous milk. So I lost my friend. Why you keep making me lose my friend?
I'm sorry.
You know what I mean?
No, it's fine. Do any of your other children have the genetic disorder?
Yes, Uwakokunre had spinal muscular atrophy and phenylketonuria, which is a metabolic disorder. And then my second daughter by my father has phenylketonuria. She was not discovered until she went into foster care. So that caused some brain damage, and she has some learning disabilities. You would never know though, but those are, some of her challenges. And then my other two children are fine, that we see. They don't have any kind of recessive disorders. And recessive disorders, they say that if both parents are carriers, then 1 in 4 children will be born with the actual disease. Where in our case, I have 2 in 4 children that was born with the disease. Well, 1 in 4 for spinal muscular atrophy, 2 in 4 for phenylketonuria. So my daughter, who has PKU, she has to be on a special diet. She cannot metabolize amino acids and proteins. So she can't eat meat, dairy products, anything high in protein. And she has to drink a special formula in order to still get some of those amino acids.
No, that makes perfect sense. Well, definitely know that that's not always an easy thing to do and to have to go through. As we start to wind down here, again, I definitely just want to thank you for being on the show. Thank you for joining me for episode 100 and just bearing your soul and your heart with us in this experience and putting yourself out there on social media and all those things like that. That's no easy feat either, especially with the content that you're sharing. Do you get a lot of not great messages? Like, do you think it's more good or bad? Because I can imagine with this world that we're in, it's social media is very interesting. It's social media, and I guess, would you call YouTube social media? I was saying YouTube, because I think YouTube is you have a lot of content there.
Right. So social media is interesting in the fact that it gives everybody the power to say what they're thinking with none of the responsibility.
Right. Very
none
true.
of the social responsibility. Like, you would not come and say that to my face if I was in front of you.
Right.
But the interesting part is that initially when I started YouTube way before it became a thing. And then my family criticized me for like putting dancing videos and videos of my kids up there. So I kind of pulled back from it. But then when I decided that I wanted to use the platform to educate people on surviving abuse and preventing abuse, most importantly, it took some time to grow. And I knew that I really wasn't taken off until I got haters.
Gotcha. Right.
So everyone was welcome. Everything was warm, encouraging, supportive. But then I hit 10,000 subscribers, and that's when the trolls started coming in.
Oh, man.
That's when the trolls started coming in. And people have been mean. They've been rude, disrespectful, but I'm gracious. I stick to, there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I answer all of them and I respond to all of them. Oftentimes I know that they have probably survivors as well, and they just don't know how to process or deal with it. And I'm like, I wish you well, and I hope you get help in your healing process. So
yeah, that's a nice way to take that perspective, because again, I don't think I'm there yet. And so I try to just grow and learn and listen from people like yourself who are brave enough to put their story out there and not worry about the pushback and all that stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So you came bearing gifts. So
always.
I mean, it's perfect too, because it's episode 100. So I've got a gift here, and it's your book, Unashamed, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool. Make sure we get that. A Life Tainted. So I'm going to be looking forward to this. Where can people get a copy? I want to make sure that they know where they can get the copy.
It's available on Amazon. It sells out pretty often, though. But you can go to my website, azizakibibi.com, and get a copy through my distributor. You didn't read what I put inside of it.
Oh, okay.
I signed it for you.
Oh, look at that. I didn't even know. To J.Nicole, congrats on your 100th episode of Griefully Podcast. Keep up the great work. Much love. Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you.
You're
And this is
welcome.
definitely something that I will not forget, having this conversation with you and having the opportunity to have this dialogue and help me in my healing journey and to continue to grow and just see life differently. I feel like you see life differently. I don't know actually how to put that into words right this minute. I'll probably reach out to you afterwards and be able to articulate a little bit more about it, but it's a different light and aura about you and just that you give off. And so hopefully it's contagious.
Yeah.
So we got this. We got some other goodies in here.
So that's from my nonprofit, Precious Little Ladies.
Nice.
Our mission is to combat child molestation, domestic violence, incestuous abuse, and sexual assault. And that's some things that, some masks.
Nice.
And, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Guys, I'm going to make sure I either put a link or somewhere in this video, you might have seen it already, the clip of Aziza on the train. This reminded me of it because you were on there passing these out and just shouting. I'm gonna say shouting. You were shouting your story, shouting your story like at the age of 8. This.
I had to because the screeching, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I know because of the train, but it was like to me, I felt like that person really wants to help other people. Like it was nothing about yourself really in that to me. I was just like, wow, this is really grassroots to help other survivors. And you also called out abusers on there. And I like that too. Like you weren't just like, oh, I want to help all the people. It was like, and if you are an abuser, then this part applies to you. And I loved it. I'm like, listen, that's what we have to do. We got to take control and have our power. So I thank you for the gifts for sure. And we can make sure that I'll have a link to any information to your website so we can follow Precious Little Ladies. We can get a copy of your book. They can follow and subscribe to your YouTube channel, all of that good stuff. I do have an inspirational boost this week, which is a quote that I like to share just for the week or something that's thought-provoking, if you will. And that's brought to us by our sponsors, Adina J Designs. They make, create, and inspire us through decorated apparel, wood signs, custom tumblers, all that good stuff. Follow them over on Instagram at Adina J Designs, ADENA, JAY, DESIGNS. And this week it is, one small crack does not mean that you are broken. It means that you were put to the test and you didn't fall apart. I love that. It's beautiful.
It is.
And it's perfect for today's episode. So I'm happy that we were able to share that. Before we get out of here, I want to touch on our In Love and Memory segment. It's very important to me to make sure that we humanize our loved ones, no matter how many years it's been or how long it's been, because they were a life and they meant something to someone and in most cases to a lot of people. And so this week, with having you on the show, our In Love and Memory segment is going to go out to your daughter, Coco.
Thank you.
And I want you to say her name.
Uwakokunre Ofure.
I would never been able to do that. And so it's a beautiful name, and I love the way you say it. And what does it mean?
It means peace and fortune comes from the ocean. And she was actually born on the beach.
Wow.
You'll read about that in my book. That was interesting.
And listen, guys, we didn't make that happen. That wasn't a plug for the book, but I would definitely want to read it and learn more about it. And so our In Love and Memory segment is going to go out to your daughter. Make sure you continue to rest well and send so much love to yourself and your family. And listen, from me, the grief bully, I send so much love to yourself and your family as you continue on your journey and the work that you're doing. If there's anything I can ever do to support you or your mission, I'm absolutely there for you. You can count on me. Guys, episode 100 is officially in the books. I'm excited. I don't drink. Otherwise, we would have cracked some champagne or did something like that. But I had a beautiful conversation with a beautiful soul. Listen, if you're not following me already, what are you doing? Please follow me over on Instagram. It's where I hang out the most at @I_am_J_Nicole, guys. Till next time, you already know. Love and light. Peace.